Everyone, Blake Sloan here with Alex Proud. A brand new episode of Agent Success podcast and obviously on video cast. But a really big topic today is super important to talk about. And we're going to talk about the mathematics of real estate. And last week we talked about structure and programs and 90-day goals and specifically, how to create that success in your life and overall business. And so today we're really going to talk about kind of two things. We're going to talk about one, how to reverse engineer success and basically reverse engineer production based on what we've seen. And if you look at the actual numbers and actually treat it like a true business, what you're going to find is overall you're set up for failure in most cases for most agents, right? And we talk about this all the time. Based on what we were talking about, what are your thoughts on that overall?
It's, the barrier of entry is low as far as getting the license goes, and everybody thinks that once you pass the test, you plug and play, here comes the money, here it comes. But that's just not the reality.
Right. And so the one thing we'll talk about is, and I'll tell this example today is what happens is so many people get in business, they pass the test, and they feel like they're doing great, and they're there, and they have that feeling of alone and starving, and they have some leads. But what I'm going to show you and have you consider today is statistically you're set yourself up for failure, right? You're literally set up for failure in that regard because what's happening is if you break down the actual numbers, which you will, and I guess we'll kind of do that right now, is if you look at national website numbers, what I've seen from all kinds of different groups, the average web lead converts at 2 to 4%, right? And so that's if you're really good. And most of them are about 2%, and that's also not counting the fact that if you're in a vacation destination like Myrtle Beach, where most of, as you all know out there, most of the web leads you get, guess where they're not from? They're not from Myrtle Beach, right? And so the reality is they have a longer sales cycle. It takes longer to come in town, and it's harder to convert those leads. And so if you reverse engineer and have this thing of success to win, that's how you ultimately win. But most people are sitting there starving at a brokerage where in reality you cannot succeed if you actually had to.
Right.
And so I'll never forget, one of my coaches came to me, and he lived in Dallas, Texas, a very successful businessman before real estate, and he said, Blake, I'm going to tell you one thing. I understand business, I understand numbers, I will come in your marketplace and absolutely destroy you every single time because I understand the numbers of business. And I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty powerful. I might want to start knowing the numbers, right? And so just looking at kind of a breakdown, I wanted to break down the numbers. And so if you're looking at, and we've had a lot of people, just kind of really quick recap for anybody who's been watching, we've had a lot of great feedback from our previous episodes. I'm sure this probably triggers some of y'all, right? But ultimately, we're just here to surf and see how we can provide information and data to really help those. We have a few people come to us, and we were really talking about lead flow. Like, what's your lead flow? And the people you talk to, right, and I've talked to, we both interviewed, what was that lead flow like?
It was very little. I mean, almost depressingly little. We're talking, 2 leads a week, tops. That's
almost everything, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is, and that's everyone we talk to, and obviously there's a lot of places that don't, but the truth is someone really investing in you, or are you investing very high level in yourself to really find that out? And so I want to break the numbers down, which I did here. If you look at the overall difference, right? So let's say your 2% conversion rate, which is pretty decent, okay? If you break the numbers down, that's 500 leads per year for you yourself to do 10 deals, which is, if you break down the average in our MLS, it's 3.57 deals per agent. If you take the amount of sales by the amount of agents, that was actually for 2017. I haven't done 2018 yet, but roughly 4 deals a year, which is absolutely terrible, which is why there's such a struggle, right? But the reality is, let's say you want to do 10 deals, which is not that much at all. You have to have 500 leads at a 2% conversion ratio. So if people I meet with, I'm like, great, how much leads are you getting? Well, I'm getting, 1 to 2 a week, 2 to 3 a week.
Yeah.
And my heart actually, hurts for them in a way because statistically, you cannot succeed with that number, right? So you break that down. I mean, ultimately, you have 500 per year, which is ultimately, if you break that down, is really, I was going to write down a big number, but obviously 10 leads per week.
Sure.
You have to have 10 leads per week to be able to do that, to potentially sell only 10 homes, which is obviously very, very hard. And so we'll talk about in a minute the number one reason that people don't make it in real estate, lack of leads.
Yes.
Period. In today's time, anybody can buy that. The number 2 reason, which we'll cover partly today and partly in the next episode, is the ability to convert leads to clients.
Right.
That's where the masses struggle. Anybody we talk to, right, we really ask them, hey, look, what do you usually do to convert? Most of the time, it's what? It's just kind of winging it, right?
Just see how it goes.
There's not a real system to convert that. And so that's what we've been able to perfect here, and I've worked my butt off for the past, almost 14 years to really kind of build a system that does that through technology and sales systems and things like that. But let's say you're really good. let's say you're the top of the top nationally in regards to numbers, and you're the top of the top, and you have a 4% conversion rate, which is pretty good, right? That's still 250 leads per year, or roughly 5 per week that are qualified, that are good. And so if you're getting, don't call me, and the number is 5555555, obviously that doesn't really count.
Right.
And so the reality is, when you look at this reverse engineer production, you got to realize, like, statistically, I was talking about an example, a realtor that I know, Facebook, great person, just sharing their business card on Facebook every day, hoping and seeing and wanting, but statistically, it's not possible to have the level of success that most people want. And so I want you to take the same thing, just taking those national numbers, reverse engineer your numbers, right, and what you're getting. And statistically, is it possible for you to hit the numbers you want?
Right.
And so if I want, let's say I wanted to do 40 deals in a year, which I think is easily doable, the goal for most of our agents, right? If you do that, that's what, 40 leads a week, and in that regard, to be able to hit that deal. And that's if you're pretty good.
Right.
And so the reality is, if you're not getting that, that's going to be a challenge for you. And so most of the time, you're set up for failure before you even start. And so I want you to kind of think about those numbers. And this is obviously building on a deeper conversation, but the reality is the mathematics of real estate are broken. And people are risking their entire career, their life, their family's life on this chance to be successful. It's a big leap for a lot of people. Sure. And ultimately, they're getting in here and they're sitting there getting 1, 2, 3, 4 leads a week, and they could never be successful no matter how good they are on the phones, face-to-face, whatever it may be.
Right.
And so what we found in inspecting that is most people are not great at sales. They're not great at conversion. There's a few people that have mastered it, and obviously companies that have mastered it, but most of the time we find that there's a huge lack of sales skills, aka the psychology of sales, to help convert those leads to clients. And so that's one thing to talk about. And what's your thoughts based on, people you've talked to, interviewed, things like that seem?
It's not just who I've talked to, it's what I've experienced as well at, outside of our house is there's a lot of different what they call strategies out there, but it comes down to hope. We got guys who are sending out postcards hoping someone's going to list with them. We got guys who are sitting in their office hoping the guy on floor duty isn't going to pick up the phone.
Which is that's a literal example. We just had that example.
It happened that way, yeah. So, hope is not a strategy. It just isn't. So, strategy is a strategy.
And part of this, podcast information is we call it real and raw. Like I said, this may be some real talk to think about that may not be comfortable, may not be, but if it serves 1 or 2 people, in my opinion, that, because this has been on my heart after we've been talking and interviewing some people who've been responding. We're like, man, what's going on? And they're like, 2 leads a week, 4. And I'm telling him, like, dude, you're screwed. There's no particular way to hit the numbers that you need for your family based on those numbers.
Right.
And so part of life and part of getting what you want out of life is having the ability to take a harsh look into reality and understand that may not work unless you make some big change.
Right.
And so part of that is getting better at sales, getting better at conversion. But the most important part I really want to talk about is lead flow. Reverse engineer numbers for you and yourself, ultimately to see where do I need to be to hit the numbers. So if you want to sell 40 a year, obviously reverse engineer average sale price, average commission. Business is a game of numbers to be able to understand where they need to be. Part of what our advantage is I've studied this for so long and feel like, I'm obviously a student of marketing. We're able to I can afford to spend my money to acquire leads because the conversion ratio is better.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of how it breaks down. That's one thing we talked about. And so statistically, most people are set up to fail. I have one more thing I was going to talk about, a stat here. The National Association of Realtors stat from 2016, the average gross income for realtors 2 years or less in the business, $9,000.
That's gross.
$9,000 gross before any business expenses, before telephone, lead generation, desk fee, split, anything, much less the Coast Carolina Association dues or whatever per MLS. That's NAR rules of numbers. And so the reality is the numbers don't lie. The statistics don't lie. It's not something that anytime I ever shoot or talk about this, it obviously pisses some people off. But my point, and I'm very passionate about this, obviously, because I see it affecting people's lives. It affects their ego, their thing. And so from a coaching standpoint, one, there's got to be a student of marketing. Or you've got to be a student of how can I obviously not be a secret agent online? How can I make sure I'm able to do this? Or align yourself with a brokerage or a team person who's willing to invest in you to help you get that. And that's kind of what we're able to do with our models. We invest highly in our team and we're able to help develop them into conversion, monsters in a way. But ultimately, they're able to kind of have that front end because in business, it takes a long time to get the return.
Right.
So that's ultimately what you're seeing, and those are usually team numbers. And so it gets back to the top 3 reasons why people fail. Number 1, lack of leads. If you look at statistically what those are, the mathematics of real estate, I want you to kind of take time. We use all the time from a business plan standpoint and look at how many leads do I need based on national numbers to make that actually work.
Yes.
And so in your case, right, if you want 40 a year, you're going to need 40 a week. And so that's kind of statistically, we've been able to improve that drastically with tools like inside salespeople,
Yes.
outside salespeople, artificial intelligence, things like that. Just kind of helps with that part. But ultimately, it comes down to lead flow number 1. This is probably the one that's the most simple, that makes the most sense. Number 2, I think, is what is the Achilles heel for most people, which is the ability to convert that lead to client.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is you get a web lead. Every single person that I interview asks the same question. What do you do? What do you say? What's your script? Almost no one has a script ever. There's no process. They're asking them, hey, what are you doing? Have you been pre-qualified yet? And that's obviously the last thing I want to ask a brand new web lead who's just looking at houses. And why is that, you think?
They don't know you.
They don't know
Why
you.
are they going to talk to you about
They don't
finances?
like you. And the last thing they want to talk about is getting pre-approved. Now,
Exactly.
do we get them pre-approved before showing properties? Absolutely. But the reality is it has to be done the right things in the right order.
Absolutely.
Because they don't want to just get pre-approved. And so what happens the minute you do that, they just shut down. And so when people are winging it, I find that's really all they talk about is, all right, pre-approved, what do you want? They set them up on some emails, and then guess what happens?
They go away.
They disappear, right? They ultimately disappear overall because that's what just happens online. And so you have to be a ninja at conversion. And so number 2 is become an elite salesperson from conversion from the psychology aspect. And we are teaching on this today, right, for over an hour in regards to how do you become elite at this sales aspect, understanding the psychology of your client, communicate a clear message to them, and 2, be willing to collide with them too if you need to in order to help them come to a clear decision.
Right.
And that's something we trained on today, very high level stuff, which we can obviously talk about later. And then 3 is the ability to position yourself as the expert so they actually listen to your advice.
Sure.
What's been your opinion, your thought on that?
These 3 in tandem with each other. The quality lead, the ability to convert to a client, not because I need to get somebody, but because there's a different level of service I can legally provide with them as a client. It's my obligation to do that. And then to position myself as the expert, because guess what? Hundreds of thousands of dollars are on the line potentially for them. A home and a family situation, a status situation is on the line for them. I have to be an expert.
Right.
That's what I vowed to do. Period.
And the reality is, here's what happens. You go through all these leads, 2 to 4% conversion ratio, you finally get someone, you kind of got, you're blowing through leads. And so obviously, if you don't have to back up, if you don't have a really good script, process, system to get them from lead to client, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because your conversion ratio is going to be very low, like 1%, right? And so you want to track this if you're doing these things, you figure out how many people do I got to talk to, how many phone calls do I got to make, and on all this. And so the reality is, what I find is, once they get them as an actual, let's say, client, or they're showing them properties, the problem you run into there is now half the people that you meet with and are showing properties, what do?
They disappear too.
They disappear, and ultimately they don't listen to you.
Exactly.
So if you have a house listed at $200,000, just came in the market, very good deal. You know the comps, you know everything's there. You know that it should sell fairly close to $200,000.
Right.
They want to make an offer of what, like 150, right? Let's make an offer of 150, and then ultimately what happens? It's not worth 150, but they don't trust you as a true expert because you haven't done one thing. You haven't clearly differentiated yourself as the expert in their mind.
Right.
And so part of the process of taking through is to help them. I want them to feel comfortable and know that I'm very good at what I do because I am a student of the business and I do push hard and have very high standards and things like that. But if you aren't able to articulate that to your client, even though you're good, they don't know or believe that, they're not going to listen to you.
Sure.
And so at that point, you become kind of what we call a savior. And so when you're there, you say, hey, look, this is not going to happen. They're like, well, we want to make this offer anyways, and you want a deal so bad because you've been struggling, right? You haven't had a closing in a while. You do it anyways, and then what happens? You write the offer. What happens to the offer?
It gets blown right
It gets
up.
blown right up, rejected, back out, and then you do that once or twice or 2 or 3 times, and then what happens? They ultimately turn on you. Like you're the problem, you're the issue, and part of it is, but when I first was in that situation of getting the business and starting that, I didn't understand that the reality is they're going to eventually turn on you if you aren't willing to collide with them and tell them the truth. right? The reality is you have to be willing to collide with the client to tell them the truth about the situation, about the reality of the marketplace, about the numbers, about the data, and about the reality of that offer actually happening.
Right.
Now, if you have not differentiated yourself to a position of being an expert, when you tell them that, they're just going to go a different way.
Sure.
And so part of that is what we call owning the frame, aka owning the frame of the expertise to make sure that they know we're respectable, we know what we're doing, we're very doggone good at what we do, and we study this market so that they should trust us.
Right.
And then ultimately, it's the trifecta of leads to follow up with, the ability to get them to face-to-face to be client, and then 3, the ability to differentiate yourself as the expert to listen to. And so those are kind of the pieces. We'll cover this in detail next time. If you take one thing from this, podcast, it should be know your numbers.
Yes.
Take at least sketch out some numbers based on what your lead flow has been the past 6 months, the past 12 months, or worst case, the past month.
Right.
How many leads do I have? If I'm at 2 to 4% conversion ratio, where does that put me? And so ultimately, a lot of times that's not very good. And so you want to be able to say, okay, at least here's my reality of where I need to be. And so that's part of what we do here as in our business plan, right? That's how we're able to have very high success in quick days. You probably just saw, actually I'll share it in this one, success story underneath one of our agents, 8 homes in the first 60 days.
Yes.
Under contract, right? The system works. How does someone come from 0 to 8 homes under contract in 60 days? Because a proven, repeatable system with a huge overflow of quality leads. And the last thing here to remember is all leads are not created equal.
No, they're not.
There's a whole different, world of how they convert, what's their percentage, right? Based on where they come from Facebook to Google to Zillow to Realty.com to anything else. There's a massive difference there in how the conversion works. And so it's important to understand those numbers. And so take one thing from this, know your numbers. One thing we'll be doing as soon as teaching a class, we're going to basically teach it. It doesn't matter. It's not a recruiting thing. We're just saying, here's the deal. We're going to provide some value, how to do a business plan, how to reach out and understand your numbers. And so if you're interested in that, reply back to the email. Say, hey, I'm interested in this. They can also go to joinblakesloan.com. You can see some case studies, some success stories there to kind of see the difference. More importantly, just fill out the thing for the consult. Say, hey, look, man, I'm really happy where I'm at. I just need some leads, or I just need a business plan. I feel lost. But the reality is, in today's time, in this world where everyone's just trying to recruit and do this and that, and they're calling and texting, the reality is, there's a saying I always say is, by their fruit you shall know them, right? Is there the proven system in place to help get you where you need to be? Is the lead flow where it should be statistically based on where you should be? And if you've been led to believe that it is, in reality it's not, it's a time to take a hard, strong look at reality of your numbers in your place. And so last couple of things, what's your feedback or your overall thoughts for anyone out there that's kind of in that place that's struggling, that is statistically hasn't really realized that they're set to fail based on the numbers, based on where they're at?
Just take a look at it from a raw point of fact. Take all feelings out of it, and it's hard to do that when you're in that state. I've been there. The industry is not broken. It is not. The way you're approaching the industry is broken. And the facts of your own numbers, which have no emotion tied to them whatsoever, are what's going to lead you to that truth. And that's all I can really say about it, is until you confront that truth head on, direct in a clean mirror like that, you're never going to make the progress you want.
100%. And that's one thing that we're passionate about too here is very, very high level sales training, both on Tuesdays and Thursday. We're huge on training. We just went through hours of it, of understanding the psychology, understanding how to do that, and the reality of helping serve clients at a very high level. But to start out, before you can do any of that, you have to have the right numbers.
Yes.
And so if you have any questions, more than happy to help serve. We're here to help provide that. Awesome topics. Really appreciate the feedback. Anything we can do, let us know, and we'll see you in the next podcast.